All right, so it's time, and I see that we have quite some audience joining in already. So thank you so much for joining in, everyone, and very, very pleased and honored to be hosting Prasanna today. Uh, Before we start the session, let's wait for just a couple of more minutes. We have 200-ish people who have joined in right now. Let's wait for a minute or two so that everyone has joined in. And in the meanwhile, maybe let me uh, do a quick introduction of myself, while I do believe that many of you might have heard from me already. So my name is Abhimanyu. I am one of the founders at Scalar Academy and InterviewBit, and I have with me, honor of hosting Prasanna. Prasanna is, he currently heads tech at Rippling as founder and CTO at Rippling. And, of course, there are a lot more things that Prasanna has done before that Prasanna would talk about. And today we are going to be talking about blockchain, which is, the new steam engine as we often talk about it, all the way from, the earlier high growth of Bitcoin, a lot of, kind of maybe tulip money around it, and then the adjustment. But today we will talk about, like we often hear about it, but rarely we understand what is blockchain, what is, crypto. So Prasanna, over to you. Up to, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Hey guys, thanks for having me. Wonderful to, see all of you guys here and chat. Awesome. So let me just start my presentation. Just a second. Awesome. Are you guys able to see my screen here? Hello?
Yes, Prasanna, your screen is visible.
Screen is visible. Awesome. Hey, nice to meet you guys. So I'm like really passionately excited about this subject, and I think it's it's happening way faster than anything that we've experienced before. I want to sort of give some historical context to what is happening, and why this is important, and why we should pay attention to this. I'm like deeply enamored by this, and I wanted to share with you guys the rate of change that's happening in this world, and why it's like once, not just in a lifetime, but like across multiple generations. This does not happen often. These things don't happen that often, and it's a huge change to the way the world works. And already if you go one generation past, right, like in our fathers' lives and stuff, their lives were sort of our grandfathers' lives were not that dissimilar to the lives of kings and all that, right? To the era of kings and stuff. Already our life has changed so fast, so quickly. It's hard to sort of identify with just a couple of generations before. And blockchain is sort of taking it to a whole new level. The rate of innovation here is just like like approaching singularity. So I'm gonna sort of talk about this deeply in my talk. So just a brief introduction to myself. Actually, I'm gonna talk, maybe spend 5-10 minutes talking about myself, because I want to give you guys the story and the context behind why this is important to me, and like where I come from. So I am just like many of you guys who are at InterviewBit or whatnot. I started out as a programmer, like deeply fell in love with computers and computer science, and did a lot of programming contests. I was ranked 1 in India top coder, twice ACMI CPC world finalist, twice Google Code Jam world finalist. So did really well at these programming contests, right? And that's the thing that I enjoyed the most, and that's what I wanted to do. My first job was at Microsoft Bing on distributed systems. my code was running on hundreds of thousands of machines. I thought that would be the cool thing, right? Like, that's the most technically challenging thing. And I sort of joined Microsoft, but then sort of got the big company training, which is basically, hey, listen, nothing much changes here. Things move pretty slowly. And then at the same time, Silicon Valley was happening. I left to Silicon Valley in 2009 with my co-founder, who was also my roommate while we were working at Microsoft. And, to start a company, we sort of lived and worked out of the Stanford dorms and tried starting companies. 18 months, nothing really worked. We had to sort of come back to India, spend 6 months in India, then go back on a tourist visa to the US to, keep trying, right? And after 18 months, one idea really took off like crazy. It was called Like a Little. It was sort of a social network that took off. Almost 20% of the US students were using that site at the peak. The peak happened within 6 months. It grew like crazy. In the first 6 weeks, almost 20 million page, we had around 20 million page views, and it was growing like wildfire, right? And, the who's who of Silicon Valley invested, like Mark Andreessen or whatnot. And Zuckerberg wanted to try to buy it. Marissa Mayer from Google tried to buy it for $50-100 million. And, so that was a, very important experience in my life. For the first time, I came very close to success. I've tasted sort of success. We didn't sell the company. The company failed, and it went to zero. It was sort of a social network / fad, just like you guys might remember Foursquare. Again today it's nowhere, right? So it sort of was kind of a blip in the radar, and it failed. But it sort of showed me, hey, listen, you can. Succeed, not just succeed, but at a grand scale, right? And after a lot of reflection and spending a lot of time elsewhere, I came back to start this company called Rippling. Now Rippling has been very, very successful now. It was valued in our last financing round at 1.4 billion dollars, and it's growing very, very fast. So I'm glad to be where I am today. I have access to a lot of resources. I have way more money than I could ever spend in my entire life. And like I consider myself extremely lucky, right? But I also wanted to talk about, that part is easy to say, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about, actually how lucky am I? Am I, unique and lucky? The folks that I knew in the programming contest community or otherwise, the smart folks, the friends that I was hanging out with, how are they doing actually? Of course I am worth like hundreds of millions of dollars now, right? But like, actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about, my cohort as a whole, like, the friends that I sort of ate food with in the hostels, did programming contests with, they're all doing actually very, very well. The point I'm trying to make is, there is this saying in the Valley that Silicon Valley is a river of money. The money is just flowing on the streams, and someone sort of tries to get at it long enough. In my case, it took 10 years for me to get here, right? Someone tries to get it long enough. Usually they get, they end up very, very fabulously rich, right? And this has been, we've sort of been riding a huge wave of wealth creation in the Valley. And I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you some, practical examples here, right? I'll quickly walk through some of my friends who got, fairly wealthy. So this is my college mates, my classmates, actually, the founders of HackerRank. Hari was my roommate, and the first founder actually was my roommate. The idea for HackerRank was conceived from my work, from our work together in our last year of college. and they've created a fabulous business now. It's now at $30 million in ARR, right? The company's valued many multiples of that. Of course, Anshuman here, Interviewbit has been fabulously successful. We did programming contests together. We hung out a lot. I was his team coach at one point. Interviewbit is, a phenomenal success. And then, I wanted to give you, you could say, hey, listen, you're sort of cherry picking people, one guy here, one guy there. So I wanted to give you like, hey, listen, actually, there is a very high density of success. It's not just like, random examples here and there. So this is like a little hacker house, right? We sort of took this house and all our employees were working out of here. This is sort of a TechCrunch reporter coming to our house to interview. And, you can see me with the white shirt sitting over there, sitting in the background. So from this house, there were many, many successes that came out, right? So I'm going to talk about those successes. From this house, there is a company called MemSQL in our YC batch, and you can see them in the photo there. And, they have around $50 million in ARR, right? The guys who are sitting next to us. And then there is a founder who came out of this house. He started a company called Playco. It is now valued at more than $1 billion by Sequoia Capital. There is an employee, our employee number one. He started a company and sold it for a few $1 million, $5 to $10 million to Palantir. Listen, like there were maybe 10 people sitting in that house. And, as you can see, there are 3 or 4 people who sort of did like extraordinarily interesting things, and have, most of them are multimillionaires for sure. I don't think anyone is sort of less than $1 million at this point. And, these people did, extremely well, right? When I came to the Valley in the beginning, I didn't believe the story. The story was told by Naval Ravikant. He's sort of he's the founder of AngelList, and, he's a friend and a mentor of mine. And, he told me the story that, they started this company called Opinions. He had 6 co-founders actually. And, 5 out of the 6 are extraordinarily wealthy. 3 of them, one of them, there are 2 billionaires in that, in that co-founder. The company was a failure, right? The Opinions company didn't make much money for the co-founders at the time. It was sort of the pre-.com era, almost like the .com era, pretty much. But the co-founders went on to be like fabulously successful, doing interesting things, right? There were a couple of billionaires. Everyone else is greater than $100 million in net worth. And there was one guy who didn't sort of quite make it. But, those were extraordinary odds, right? That's where the saying comes that Silicon Valley is a river of money, river of flowing money. And, the best decision, the most important decision that I made, which is sort of closely associated with my wealth, the amount of wealth I was able to create, is to move to Silicon Valley, right? It was very, very hard for me to move. I went in on a tourist visa, right? It would have been much easier if I just sort of, my co-founder used to tell me, hey, listen, why don't we go to India and start a company? Why do we need to go to the Valley and go through all this sort of immigration trouble? And, I would say that's the most important thing that I ever did, to sort of buy me odds of success. It was worth going that extra mile, right? Now, because if you look at the history of the world, there are always, these centers that are evolving, centers of the world that are evolving. It was, when there were painters and artists, it was France, in the 17th century. And, most recently it has been Wall Street, right? The most ambitious young minds all over the world aggregate in New York to do finance. And that's that was the most important thing that was going on in the world. And it was the center of the world. And, to the extent that, people like me from a very humble background, people like you and me, who are able to sort of make such huge impacts on this world and create billions and billions of dollars in wealth. It is because we are riding a very important trend in history, that the center of the world is changing. It moved. It moved from Wall Street in New York, in Manhattan, to Silicon Valley, right? And and my cohort of people, my friends who are playing that move, are getting insanely wealthy, right? So it's not really a coincidence. I mean, like, of course, my friends who are not in the technology field at all are not wealthy, right? Their living standards have improved a little bit, but just like minuscule, right? So this is centered towards technology. It is centered towards the way the world is moving from Wall Street. The center of the world is moving from Wall Street to Silicon Valley to technology, and that is what is creating these insane fortunes. And it's a huge move, right? Like who thought these companies could be valued at trillions of dollars? I mean, it would be a joke, when I came to the Valley in 2009, to say a company would ever be valued at $1 trillion, right? But now, there are 5 companies or something, which are valued at $1 trillion. Like technology companies are valued at, there are so many companies valued at hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So on the back of this trend is, where, we sort of get to make a tiny sliver of this large wealth creation pie, right? Now, I mean, we are lucky enough and fortunate enough to witness one center of the world move in our lives. If you're lucky, you would sort of witness one such thing, right? These things don't move that often. These sort of large, insane trends don't play that often. I think, we are looking at the second one already. The second one is crypto. Center of the world is moving one more time. And it has decisively moved. I think it has absolutely happened. All my life, in Silicon Valley, you sort of live in the future, right? You sort of know, you already have people who are sort of like already living in the future, and you understand, okay, this is how the world is going to look. Everyone else is going to live, 5 years down the line, exactly like this, right? What is extremely clear is, the center of the world has moved one more time. It has been accelerated by this, by the crypto revolution. And, COVID has certainly helped. Things have become more distributed. You can start things anywhere you want. Crypto is a center of talent. The best and the brightest minds in the world are going here. If I was trying to make a living again, and I was just like fresh leaving Microsoft, I would absolutely be on crypto, and my son will be on crypto. This is where, an important sort of change in the world is happening, right? It's extremely distributed. It's not that geographically concentrated. These teams are distributed from day one. Now we need to sort of try and understand, hey, like, I'm going to try and make sense of this whole thing, what's going on here. Going back in history, if you look at the steam engine era, when steam engine was invented, that is sort of when we had this level of prosperity in such a short period of time. This is not normal, right? Our forefathers didn't quite have like entire cohorts of people, just like getting insanely wealthy, right? Like, billions and billions of dollars. This is sort of, in 1950 to 1970 or something, maybe even sort of going back from 1940s to 1970, it was a quiet period. People weren't getting wealthy as much. The way to make wealth was to sort of climb the corporate ladder, right? It was an era post consolidation. So this is all very, very new to most of the world, right? It is definitely very new to my father or my grandfather, because they didn't quite see this, kind of wealth explosion happening. But if you look at history, If you go, 4-5 generations back to the time of Nikola Tesla and Edison, they actually got fabulously wealthy, and they were insanely leveraged. In fact, it was a much more golden time than the times that we live in today, because Nikola Tesla or Edison, they didn't have large teams or like large companies. They were just like groups of researchers, right? And they invented patents, and they got fabulously wealthy. They were sort of the billionaires of the time, and they were some of the richest men in the world, for creating inventions and patenting them. So it was a much more purer leveraged time, where one guy, without convincing others to create a company or whatever, he just goes into a room, thinks for like like a year, and then comes out with a groundbreaking innovation and patents it, and that sort of created a lot of wealth for them. So they had as much leverage as the times that we live in, and maybe arguably more. And somewhere along the way, the world lost those periods because things consolidated. So how did they sort of get this leverage? What is the driving factor? Why could Edison become one of the most richest people in the world by just being a scientist, right? Now, what actually happened at the time, the defining moment of the time, it was called the early 19th century, right? 1900 to 1920. 1920 was, of course, the roaring 20s, where, people thought, there was going to be infinite prosperity, and the era of like poverty and stuff is gone. And, so, it was a huge bubble at the time, huge speculative bubble, economic bubble. And the bubble was driven on top of, fundamental technological breakthroughs. The first one was the steam engine, and then shortly followed by electricity and cars and aeroplanes. Within 20 years, within 25 years, life had changed considerably, right? Someone invented the steam engine, and then quickly, shortly after that, people invented electricity, people invented cars, people invented, you had cars suddenly, you had electricity in your house suddenly, you could read at night, you had, machines that were running on electricity in your house, the potential to create so many such machines was existing. And, you even had like aircraft, flights that were getting invented. So that was the context, that was the optimism that was around at the time, where we thought like this growth was going to continue forever. I'm not going to talk a lot about why that didn't continue and all that stuff, but the important thing to understand here is, the steam engine, when it was invented, the thing that it did was it really connected the world for the first time, right? And it connected the physical world. Suddenly, a coal driller or a coal producer in one part of America could compete with another coal driller in the extreme opposite of America on price, right? The most efficient starts to win. You're in sort of North America and other guys in South America, but you can produce coal for half the price, then you're going to win the market, right? So for the first time, the physical geographies got connected, the world got connected a lot more, and it was no longer these sort of independent markets and independent regional markets. Now it's sort of like one huge market, and that created a lot of consolidation, right? That created a lot of monopolies. It created the Standard Oil. In any sector, the lowest cost producer was winning, and it sort of really unlocked a wealth redistribution of the world, where the third and the fourth most efficient players got wiped out, and the first efficient player just took over all the market. So it was one major consolidation and redistribution of wealth, and it created some of the richest people in the world that we know, like Rockefeller and so on. And we are going through such a phase with the advent of the internet. The internet changed the world. People didn't sort of realize it at that time, but it completely changed the world. Again, if you're providing an internet service, the lowest cost, the best product, regardless of geography, is able to win. It is completely interconnected, these regional markets, into sort of one central market. And, like it's sort of as important as the steam engine. And we are sort of riding on the back of that. This whole tech wave is sort of happening on the back of that, right? This unlocking of potential everywhere in the world. Like, a guy like me, creating $1 billion in wealth, it's sort of enabled by the internet. That people from all across the world can sort of have this level of leverage, right? Now, all of us got so the tech boom happened, and all of us sort of got fabulously wealthy. There was a saying that programmers made a lot of money, right? What has changed with crypto is actually programmers are actually creating money. It's not like, someone else creates the money and pays you. Now, now programmers can actually create the money. It is the most exciting thing that's happening in the world. And in a lot of ways, just like the steam engine era, the internet enabled, global connectivity. It enabled the best companies to sort of take over the entire world. Even in the steam engine era, the best companies took over, just the country, right? Just the region. It didn't take over the entire world, because you couldn't sort of, there was still a geographic disadvantage, quite a disadvantage actually. Like if there is a lowest cost coal producer in the US, you could still have, a different winner in Europe. With the internet, even that is sort of taken out, right? And then just like the steam engine era, creating a lot of monopolies where the lowest cost producers, the best products are. So you guys are, excuse me. So I heard that people are not able to see my screen. Let me sort of try sharing again. Are you able to see my screen now?
Prasanna, your screen is visible to me. Like folks who are not able to see, maybe just try refreshing it. Might be an issue on your browser, but yeah, your screen is visible, Prasanna.
Cool. So yeah, I was saying, just like, so in the internet, the best products win the entire world, the global markets, right? It is sort of, it has created, much larger monopolies, than even the railroads era. And these monopolies, called Facebook and Google and whatnot, have insane control over our lives. And, you can already see that from companies sort of printing $1 trillion market caps. And, there is a huge change that's coming, even in the structure of those monopolies. Crypto is sort of bringing into question, even the Facebook's business model, and, a company like Twitter's business model, even though they're sort of global monopolies. And, I'm going to talk about that quite a bit in this talk. And it is already here, right? People could say, hey, it's a speculative thing. It's a tulip mania, but it's sort of valued today at a $2 trillion market cap. It has withstood many such bubbles. It has sort of it is relatively new. It has started in 2008, but it has seen many, many crypto winters. It is attracting some of the smartest and the best minds in the world, and it is going to continue to attract the best in our generation. And it's going to produce the next Rockefellers. The first trillionaire in the world will be created in crypto. So let's talk more about this. So, I gave you a lot of stories about people, friends who created a lot of wealth in my circle, right? But those stories really dwarf what I'm going to tell you, what I'm going to show you right now. It's absolutely mind-blowing. if you've been following the news, there was a guy called Meta Cohen, who was a mysterious, secretive guy. Nobody knew who he was. And he paid $69 million to buy an NFT, a non-fungible token, which is an artwork done by a guy called Beeple. And, this guy, paid $69 million. 69 is sort of like a joke, right? Elon Musk sort of keeps talking about the number 69. So this guy paid $69 million. It's a very expensive joke to buy a painting. And, nobody knew who he was. They were searching for him all over the world. And, this guy is actually a friend of mine for, 10 plus years. I've known him. He's from Chennai. His name is Vignesh Sundaresan. And, we've been friends for like 10 plus years now. He and another college roommate of mine worked together on a startup in Chennai. So, he's not from that far away. And, a guy who, he's now a billionaire, a pure crypto billionaire, right? And, he sort of paid like $69 million as the most expensive joke in the world. And, for a while, people were trying to figure out who he really was. So, the story of this guy is even more insane, even more extraordinary, and unbelievable, right? He's a Tamil guy. And this is his track record. He was nothing 8 years ago. He had to a total $10,000 in his name 8 years ago. And he's now a billionaire. And he's not a billionaire because, he went out and created companies or whatever. He's a billionaire because he made the right crypto investments. He bought, he sort of introduced me to Bitcoin in 2013. He was all in. He had $10,000 at the time. He was all in on Bitcoin. And, that's 1,000x. It would be a bigger multiple if not for the other things that he did. He did many things in this 8 years, but the three most important decisions that, made him who he is, he bought Ethereum for 50% of his, money at the time, at the initial coin offering. And that's 100,000x for him, right? He told me to buy Ethereum for various reasons. I'll tell you, I don't want to go into, I didn't buy it, what a sucker I am, for missing that. I thought, hey, my company Like a Little has like so many users. We were valued at 40 million. This new bullshit thing called Ethereum is also valued at 40 million. Like, my company is worth more than that. How wrong was I? So, that was 100,000x for him. And, and then he bought, when he was extremely rich and, he was worth $10 million at that time, and he was putting in 1/3 of his net worth on a new thing called Polkadot. And I was like, hey, listen, you're already rich. Why are you taking these kind of insane risks? Why would you put 1/3 of your net worth into this new thing, which is just a white paper and is already valued at $300 million? And that was 100x for him from that price. It's now worth $30 billion, $40 billion. And he's an amazing, amazing guy. I've learned a lot from him over the last 10 years. He's a crypto billionaire, and his biggest expense is this $69 million art that he bought, right? He has no other expenses. He doesn't have any physical assets. He has no home, no cars. He doesn't have much USD in his bank account either. It's all in crypto. He's all in on crypto. I've told him many, many times to diversify, but, he's not going to diversify. And he lives in Singapore these days because of its crypto friendly laws and regulations. And, this is insane. This was not possible in any other generation, that you could just like invest your way to a billionaire. And, yet a friend very close to me, who I've known for 10 plus years, did it. Right. This is absolutely happening. And it's, money is sort of what brings people in. But if it's not just money for this guy, right? He could diversify across all these bear markets. And at certain points, it was very, very obvious that a bear market is coming, right? And, he wouldn't sell a penny. There is no way he's sort of leaving the crypto land. It's way more than the money here. It's a religion, right? It's a movement. It's a very important movement. And it is a religious movement. It's sort of like Christianity to some extent. The saying in crypto is HODL, hold on for dear life. It is sort of you don't sell. You're in it for the religion. We'll talk about why. It is not often that you hear religion and technologies in sort of the same sentence. Actually, but if you zoom in enough, if you read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 book, most technology companies, the most important movements are actually cults, right? People in it sort of believe in it like it is a religion. And it gets crazy and crazy. The founder of this religion is a mysterious man whose name is Satoshi Nakamoto. And, till today, nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows, like where he is, who he is. He started Bitcoin, right? And, Satoshi is a genius, a complete genius. He started this thing called Bitcoin. He's worth $35 billion for founding Bitcoin, right? Not for founding Bitcoin, but he was the only guy who was mining Bitcoin for a while. And, as a result of that, he's worth $35 billion today, right? Nobody knows who he is. He has not moved a single coin from the 35 billion. So he's not spent, like any money from that, so he's not gotten wealthy at all. He's not spent a single dollar from this invention, right? Which absolutely changed the world, which is worth like, $1.3 trillion. And, you can imagine like how much, people are trying to search and find where the heck is Satoshi, and nobody knows. He's an absolute genius. And that is sort of, where this religious movement is coming from. That is where, this movement is sort of getting a sense of religion that, hey, listen, Satoshi was so selfless, which like, it's sort of almost like an act of God. People are speculating, what the fuck, these things cannot happen, right? Like, if you're a human, what are you motivated by? You might be motivated by fame. Of course, Satoshi was not, he didn't reveal who he was. You still don't know. You can't find out. You can be motivated by money. Of course, Satoshi was not. He is still not, spent a single dollar from his fortune, right? So, you don't even understand what his motivations are. Certain important changes in history are so weird that it's sort of like, people speculate it's just an act of God or something, right? So that's where this mysterious religious roots of this whole movement is coming from, is from the selfless founder, who did it for the world. And if you look at the first block of Bitcoin, it has a New York Times article from 2009. Bitcoin was launched in 2008, and the first block of Bitcoin has this New York Times article which says Federal Reserve bails out Wall Street for the 4th time. And Bitcoin was a rebellion to that, right? It is sort of starting with a mission statement saying, hey, America, the most powerful country in the world, the most powerful currency in the world, the US dollars, this is a rebellion against you, right? This is the rebellions against state control of money. This is sort of the free world, and we are going to start it. And that's the religion that people are, passionately drawn into. That, hey, just like I can determine my life, there is still a lot of things that I can't determine. And, the control of wealth, the control of money, is something that, people want to free from the control of the government. And this is sort of no ordinary feat. And, I spoke about the act of God and stuff like that, which might be like large words, but let's sort of look into what went into creating the Bitcoin, right? So, a computer science sort of throwback into this is there was an unsolved problem in computer science called the Byzantine general problem. Okay. And it was unsolved for 25 years. Now, what is that problem? To simplify it, think of it as like, you have databases, right? In databases, you have, like, imagine a master database, right? So let's say there are 5 masters in a MySQL cluster, in a database cluster. And, how do you make sure that they all converge on the same state? How do you make sure they all attain consensus? They all agree on one global state. When and the important twist here is when they can't all trust each other, right? So imagine there's a global network of a database, and they all need to sort of agree on what the database state is. Today, the way databases work is, you have one master, many slaves, and at any point in time, any operation on the database that comes in, create or update, or every update is sort of recorded in a transaction operation log, right? And the master decides, hey, this transaction came before this transaction, and it sequences these transactions and creates the op log, right? And the slaves just blindly trust the master and download the op log and replicate those transactions on themselves so that they all converge on the same state. That is the state of the art of databases today. And for a long time, people were trying to imagine, hey, could we run a combined database? What if the master what if the master, if you can't trust the master, if all these DBs don't trust each other, but they still need to attain consensus, how would you do it, right? This problem was unsolved for 25 plus years. It was one of the hardest computer science problems, and people are imagining, a lot of different algorithms where, you want to attain consensus really fast, right? This is database, you're sort of talking sub-millisecond latencies. And how do you attain consensus really fast? People were thinking, along those lines for 20, 25 plus years. And then Satoshi came in and, he solved this problem. This anonymous guy, who just like published this paper and solved this problem. And that paper was not accepted or sent to any conference, right? In academia, you're not anonymous. You're doing it for the name. But, this guy came in and solved the problem. And it's very interesting, the way he solved it is, by sort of taking an opposite approach. Everyone was trying to attain very quick consensus, but Satoshi came in and said, took the opposite approach and said, consensus is going to take 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, right? And that is mind blowing in a database land. Like, for people to agree on a state, taking 12 hours is sort of like, mind blowing. But that was the solution that Satoshi came up with. That was sort of the breakthrough in computer science. The way it sort of worked is, you have these master slave architecture, right? In databases, if you can't trust the master, you need to rotate the master. Every round you sort of get in a new master, and slaves don't just blindly trust the master. They sort of make sure that, they're sort of recording the transactions and applying the transactions on the database and attaining their own state, right? So if there is an invalid transaction, the slaves won't apply the transaction. So it doesn't trust that the master always gives a valid transaction either. And now the question is, how do you decide who gets to be the master? And this, and that is very important, right? Because the master can sort of drop transactions, and all that stuff. It has a lot of powers. So the way you sort of decide who gets to be the master is based on solving a random puzzle, a completely random puzzle. So you generate a really large random number, and the puzzle is to find the closest random number to this random number, which is divisible by another large number, another large random number, right? So the only way to solve this puzzle is by checking the next number, by just keep incrementing and try to divide and see, and see if it is divisible or not. In fact, the actual puzzle is, you're given a random number, and you need to sort of generate the closest number, to that random number, which hashes which actually hashes to have 20 bits of zero in the end. So since hash is a function that's not really predictable, that's not sort of invertible, the only solution to this problem is you sort of keep incrementing the number and hash it and check if it has so many zeros, right? So this is called proof of work. Now, the intuition here is, listen, if you have a lot of distributed masters that are running, and if you have a malicious computer who's coming in and pretending as a master, you can't count, you can't keep track of the number of people who are running these computers, because one malicious guy could just pretend like, he's, thousands or even millions of masters by just creating different IP addresses, right? So how do you create a unique so that, so that as long as the majority of the network is honest, the database can come to a consensus in a honest way. So to even sort of have a footprint of how many masters, how much say or vote a person should have, Satoshi came up with this idea called proof of work. The only way to solve this problem is by doing work. You had to do this sort of costly computations. And the more the work, the insight here is the work, the sort of incrementing and hashing kind of work is actually going to cost you money. This computation is going to cost you money. So you're spending some real world money to secure the Bitcoin network. And, the amount of time you get to be the master is sort of proportional to how much economic resources or money you contribute towards the network. You're called a miner. A miner sort of runs one of the copies of the distributed database, and how much, how long you get to be master is decided by the proportion by which you're contributing, computational power to this network, right? So this is called proof of work. This is how sort of Satoshi solved, the master rotation problem, across untrusted masters, right? So, and that was a chief invention of Satoshi. And the mind-blowing part is he sort of did this computer science breakthrough and immediately started this currency called Bitcoin. Like, what, Bitcoin is a major marvel in economics, right? So you not only had someone who solved this amazing computer science problem, he also sort of solved this economics problem and, created the system called Bitcoin, right? And this is sort of, a major, like unexpected event, so, and it's valued at $1.3 trillion today. Now, technically it's sort of just a simple distributed database. The stuff that the database is coming to consensus on is, for every account, how much Bitcoin balance does it hold, right? It's sort of a simple distributed database. That's what it's coming to a consensus on. The table has, for an account, how much, Bitcoin balance does the account have? If you run one of the masters, one of the minor nodes, the masters of this database, you get some transaction fees and coins from this protocol, right? One famous joke is, when people are speculating who is Satoshi, some people think, he is probably artificial general intelligence. So imagine, imagine if computers became powerful enough to create general intelligence, right? And if you're AI, let's say you're AI, you wake up inside a computer, you're extremely powerful. You could do anything you want. But the problem is humans can turn off the computer switch and you would die, right? Now, what would you do as an AI? Like, you don't want to spook the humans into understanding that, you are so powerful that they can sort of turn it off. So you want to play it dumb. But, you want to find a way so that you can replicate across millions and millions of machines all over the world. How do you do that? Well, how do humans behave? Humans do anything for money. So what if, you sort of solve a couple of computer science breakthroughs and create a new form of money called Bitcoin, so that humans are just like going crazy, mad all over the world, creating these miners on which you can replicate onto, and it becomes harder and harder for humans to turn you off. So that's sort of this folk theory joke that Satoshi Nakamoto is probably AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is trying to find its way into the world, right? So so jokes aside, that's this is a new revolution. It's the new bank account, right? It's a completely permissionless bank account where for the first time countries cannot confiscate your wealth. You're not like, nobody knows who owns these Bitcoins. It's completely anonymous. On your computer, you just create a public private key pair, right? Which are inverses of each other. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking two large prime numbers, and multiply them together so that they sort of create this larger number who's just multiple of these two primes, right? And whenever you hash anything, these work as inverse hashes into this composite field. So let's say there is a prime number P, prime number Q. P times Q is this field. So what that means is, you take modulo any number, you take modulo P times Q, right? That forms a set of all numbers from 1 to P times Q minus 1. And, and if P and Q are sort of two complementary keys, because computers find it much easier to multiply than to factorize large numbers, only the user who generated P and Q knows those factors. So you can sort of, I can tell you P times Q, what P times Q is. So I can just freely share that with you, but you will never be able to find the factors, P and Q. You will only know the combined multiple number, right? Because these are very large numbers. Factorization is much difficult computer science problem than multiplication. So the way it works is you can think of it simply as like, public private key pair are just inverse hashes. So if you take, if you hash something with the public key and then hash it again with the private key, you get back the original word, right? So here you take hello world and hash it once with the public key and hash it again with the private key, you get back hello world, right? So on your computer, you can generate these numbers P and Q, and you can store those keys, public private keys, on your local host. And, you can use your public key as your account, as your passport into this Bitcoin world, where you can store your account balances. You can share your public key with your friend or something, and he can send you Bitcoins to that by just knowing the public key. And no one can consent, no one knows that you're that person. No one can sort of take away that, spend that money without your permission, because, miners only accept a transaction if you have signed it with your private key, right? So let's say there's a transaction which says send 10 coins to this address, to this new address, right? Now the miners of the protocol reject the transaction unless it has a signature by the private key of the origin account, right? So from your account, if money is going out, you need to sign it. How do you sign it? You take the message and hash it with your private key and give it to the miner. Now, if the miner hashes it with your public key and gets back the original message, then he knows that you're the person who signed. No one else can forge your signature. So for the first time, cryptography has sort of like, given back powers to the user in a way that, people can't figure out. The money is, you're insanely rich. My friend who's a billionaire, no one can figure him out, right? Because in the real world, he's not, behaving that rich. No one can confiscate his wealth for the same reason. And this is huge. This is insanely huge in a historical context. So just going back to the history of money, what is money, at a very fundamental level is, before this, we used to do barter. I had wheat, you had sugar. I came with you with my wheat and you gave me your sugar, right? And the issue with that is, you don't have a sugar harvest yet. Wheat grows in winter season, sugar grows in summer season, let's say. Now I need to store my wheat till you have sugar till summer, and then a lot of my wheat rots. You're hungry because your family is hungry because you don't have wheat yet. All these problems happen, right? So to sort of just replace these two edges of a barter system with just one edge. So instead, if I had money, I sold my wheat today, and got money, I sort of move my purchasing power to the future. And when it's summer, when you have a sugar harvest, I come back with the money and I buy your sugar, right? So that's the reason for money to evolve as an exchange mechanism. It's just much more efficient than barter. And for a while, many countries sort of created money based on gold. Gold was sort of the international currency for a while. People somehow naturally agreed on that unit of exchange. Gold doesn't have any sort of other fundamental value, right? It was just shiny, and everyone started agreeing to use it as a unit of tracking money, and it worked for many centuries. And if you look at history, Rome was one of the most successful empires, and they would print money based on gold. They would say, hey, listen, one like 10 Roman money is redeemable for 10 units of gold, 10 grams of gold. And then once a recession hits, then the emperor would say, no, now it's redeemable only for 5 grams of gold. And then they'll create a lot more currency and everyone will feel rich. And then the next recession will hit, and then they'll say, oh, it's now redeemable only for 2 grams of gold, right? So this is called currency debasing, and it happens over and over again, and it has happened in history several times. The most recent debasing that we're all seeing is like the money supply in the US. It was $8 trillion in 2008 after the recession. So in the 2008 recession, when Satoshi sort of fought against, created Bitcoin, fighting against the establishment, the total money supply in the US was $8 trillion, and US printed $1 trillion to sort of bail out the banks and rescue the economy. And that was what Satoshi fought against. In 2020, when coronavirus happened and economy fell into a recession, in 2020 alone, within 3 months, the US printed $8 trillion in new money supply, right? This is just like happening in epic proportions. It is sort of similar to the Roman debases. And fiat money, throughout history always crashes within a couple of centuries, right? It is if one thing is predictable, it is that the fiat money gets debased and it crashes, right? The longest time the fiat money sort of lived was in China. For 2 centuries, it was alive. During the dynasty of Ming, it was the world superpower for 2 centuries. The dynasty of Ming, it was the richest, it was the center of the world at the time. And, it survived for 2 centuries, right? So that was the longest that fiat money has always survived in history. And, the US dollar is going through, a similar movement. And it's sort of happening all around the world. Usually when these sort of crashes happen, it's not isolated to the US, like every country sort of starts following it. And, sooner or later it comes to an end, right? And in the historical context, US is actually an economic aberration. If you look at the GDP per capita growth of the world, it has sort of almost, it was almost constant. It was like less than 0.5% per year for 2000 years, since like man started farming and, cultivating food and, forming civilizations around, 5,000 years or 10,000 years ago. And for a while, GDP wasn't growing all that much. It was at like 0.5% per year or less. And then suddenly 200 years ago, United States happened and GDP per capita started shooting up. It has been growing for the last 200 years at 4% per year. And one of, the reasons that I believe that to be an aberration is like, before the US happened, if you're a successful baker, you started the 3rd bakery, 4th bakery, 5th bakery, and, you hit the gold. You didn't want to look so successful because the armies will come and steal from you. Violence always wins wealth. So, so you hid your gold, right? But United States, for the first time, guaranteed that there's going to be rule of law. The military is not going to arbitrarily steal from people. The people who get rich can keep their wealth, and they can allocate capital with their wealth, right? So for the first time, the baker created McDonald's, right? He created nationwide franchises, and his wealth was guaranteed. There was a violence guarantee. There is a monopoly on violence. Only the government can exert it. But it's there is a promised there is a promise that it'll be fair. In whatever sense of fairness. But that created this insane economic growth where the people who are able to create wealth are able to sort of compound it for a long time, and they sort of help grow the world. So that's a fairly new model. It has only been around for the last 200 years or something. So I was saying, like, now coming back to how this stands, with the steam engine and the internet, countries are now becoming irrelevant because internet is sort of connecting across countries, and COVID and crypto are sort of like great accelerators in this, right? Now, on the internet, a big primitive that was missing was money. And people have been trying to create internet money for a long time. It is actually an important component of making the internet work. I mean, imagine how many spam mails you're getting, right? But the right protocol for email, if the right protocol for email is to attach a tiny, like 1 cent with every email that people send, then you can just solve the spam problem. You can solve the spam requests problem, right? Just one case study is, there was a guy who bought this company called BitTorrent. Many people have used torrents here, might have used torrents here, right? BitTorrent, he bought it for $100 million, right? And it is a protocol where you sort of exchange files and share stuff and all that, right? And he transformed it by introducing a native token within Bitcoin called BitTorrent token, where when I give you some information, you give me some BitTorrent tokens, right? So we sort of keep the BitTorrent token blockchain as a unit of account for how much I have helped others versus how much others are helping me. If I take others' help, I spend some token. If I'm helping others, then I gain some tokens, right? So there is this ledger called BitTorrent token, which is now worth $8 billion. He bought it 3-4 years ago for $100 million as a native internet product, and now that has been transformed into $8 billion product, right? It is kind of obvious. You would want to keep track of these things, right? So money is a base primitive for the internet, and it has been missing for a while. And it is kind of obvious that like many other things will get unlocked because of this. We ran out of time, actually. I just noticed. I have quite a few talks.
Prasanna, that's up to you. If you like, if your time permits, we can go on for a little more.
Okay, so I'll try to sort of cover it as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. This is probably going to run for maybe even 30 more minutes. If people want to sort of drop off, then
we can maybe quickly run a poll. Guys, can you give a thumbs up if you are okay with going for another 25-30 minutes? Looks like pretty much everyone is happy with that, Prasanna, so we can do it.
Okay. All right. So far, whatever we've spoken about is till 2009, right? And now I'm going to talk about the future, right? Like, Ethereum, this happened in 2010, 2011. This is the first general purpose database. Bitcoin stored only Bitcoin is a distributed database, but it stored account to balance data. That's it, right? Ethereum, you store the state of an arbitrary virtual machine called the Ethereum virtual machine. The virtual machine has some data that it can store, and and you just stored it, right? It's a global computer. As an example, I'll show you the code of an open auction. This is a simple open auction that is built on Ethereum. This is on Ethereum's language called Solidity. And in this auction, you can see that
Prasanna, your if you have switched the screen, that is not visible.
this is not visible.
Right now, we still see your your slide on Ethereum First General DB.
Okay, got it. Sorry. You guys can see this, right?
Yes, yes. Now we can. Maybe you might want to zoom in a little bit for better visibility.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So this is a simple auction. The code on living on Ethereum for an auction, right? This is an example code. And the thing is, in this auction, there is this function called bid. There is a contract, and it has some variables, state variables, that are stored in the Ethereum virtual machine state. And this state is sort of committed to the database, right? And every miner node of Ethereum is agreeing on the state of these variables. And not just these variables, but of all the classes. You can think of it like a class, right? So there are many classes that are living in the, and you can instantiate these classes on the Ethereum virtual machines RAM. It's not really a RAM, it's sort of the memory of this virtual machine. Every class that you initialize is sort of using this memory, shared memory. And this memory, like millions of miners across the world, are coming to a consensus of what the state of these variables are. Now, let's say, how does it even work? So let's say there is a function called bid. Now, if you want to bid on this auction, you call this function. What does calling this function mean? You submit a transaction with let's say 500 ether. So you're bidding 500 ethers, and you're sending 500 ether to this contract and calling this function called bid. Now you compose a transaction signed by your public key saying, hey, I'm in this transaction metadata, you say that I'm going to call class simple auction and call the function bid with 500 ether, and this function gets called. Now this transaction gets submitted to all the miners, the millions of miners across the world, and they all agree when this transaction completes. This is how the state is going to change, of these variables are going to change, right? So you have a shared database, almost like a shared database where everyone is around the world is coming to a consensus on how the state of the database is going to change. And you have these stored procedures. You can think of this bid as a stored procedure within a database that you can invoke as a transaction. And, people globally agree what happens, right? So this is code that you can publish to this, global computer. And, and this creates code as law. Primitive, right? Everyone who's participating in this auction can read the code and know how the auction works. You don't need to trust anyone. You just trust the code. You just trust the Ethereum virtual machine. Everyone can read the code and agree how an auction should work. They can build open source code to create an auction. And, you don't need to trust any third party to hold your ether as collateral that they would later give back, right? These auction houses, it is just Ethereum land. This virtual machine can run this auction, and anyone can write this auction, right? So code is law in this territory, and you don't need to trust anyone. And for the first, that's the biggest breakthrough after Bitcoin, because if you have a DB, then you might as well create a general purpose database, right? And that has created a Cambrian explosion in this space. It has just, the world has changed since then. Since 2010, it's been 10 years. So what has happened in these 10 years? So there is this huge wave called DeFi. DeFi is a short form for decentralized finance. It has completely taken over Ethereum. And this is the new Wall Street. Like Wall Street is literally, their business is moving into Ethereum, right? Because you are replacing all these trusted middlemen with trustless middlemen, which is basically Ethereum, right? And, there are infinite new currencies and coins that have been created since. There is a class called ERC20. It's a base class in Ethereum that supports creating a new coin. So it's, if you want to create a new coin, it's as simple as deriving this base class and implementing a few functions in Ethereum, and you have a new currency, right? At a fundamental level, a new currency is just a mapping, is just a hash map from an address to balance, how much balance that address public key holds, right? And some rules around how to earn it or spend it. It's a unit of account where, it is sort of a new network where if you add value to the network, you can earn the currency. And if you sort of take away value from the network, you need to spend the currency. That's all it is. That's all currency is at the end of the day. And in Ethereum land, it's just a base class that you derive, and you have an address to balance mapping, and you can define the rules of how to earn or spend the currency. So I say Wall Street, right? The biggest Ethereum currency is called Uniswap. It is valued at $40 billion today. It started as a 300 line of code project by a developer over a weekend, right? Again, we're talking about, and it was founded only a year back, right? So, and it's now valued at $40 billion. How many people have heard of it? So it's not that that much of a household name like Twitter is. Twitter is probably valued at $40 billion as well, but more people have heard of Twitter than Uniswap. Now, what is Uniswap again? So Uniswap is an automated market maker. So let's say you have Ethereum and Bitcoin, and you want to trade some Bitcoin for Ethereum. So this is a program, this is a similar class which lets you swap between Ethereum and Bitcoin or any two currencies, right? And it is going to give you a quote. So it is sort of an automated market maker. For making the markets for you. So it buys and sells Bitcoin and Ethereum or like any other currency. To trade with it, it'll charge you a 0.05% fees, right? Now again, like when you trade in your with your broker, they charge way more fees than this, right? But because Wall Street is becoming commoditized, because code is doing this market making, it charges only like 5 basis point fees. And those fees don't go to the founders or some company. It goes to the whole people who hold these tokens, the Uniswap tokens, right? For the first time, there is something called a DAO that's introduced. A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. Anyone who holds a Uniswap token, gets to govern how Uniswap works. They decide how to change the code, how to upgrade the code, what fees to charge, what to do with the fees that the company earns, and nobody knows who the shareholders of this company are. The people only know the public keys who hold these shares, the Uniswap tokens, but nobody, this is completely autonomous and it's decentralized. It's not sort of people sitting in a room and making decisions. The boardroom is on the boardroom is just some internet anonymous forums, right? So that is how crypto tokens work. It's decentralized. It is an autonomous organization, right? And just look at how big it is now. There is $8 billion worth of liquidity, on Uniswap, and you can see that it only started in May 2020. There is only $14 of liquidity, right? And you can see the rate at which it's growing. It's now at $8 billion. In the last 1 hour alone, last 24 hours, there was $1.43 billion of liquidity. That was sort of exchanged in this. So that is the sort of rate of growth that we're talking about here, right? This is just insane. This is the new Wall Street, and we live in an age of infinite leverage, where within a year you can create $40 billion of wealth. And any autonomous person, any anonymous person can participate in this wealth creation. Can buy these tokens and share a part of the wealth creation. The thing about this wealth is it's actually really important for it also works. This part computer science is also like part economics. The thing with crypto. So how did Uniswap create $8 billion of liquidity. How did it convince $8 billion of people to sort of market make, right? So let's study, it would be a case study. And, to go back in history, like speculative bubbles always build everything. They've built the telephones, they've built the railways, they've built the internet. The internet was a huge speculative bubble that many of you could remember. Some random companies were trading at billions and billions of dollars, and that is what created the internet for us today. If not for the speculation, the real innovation does not happen. It is called capital allocation. People are allocating capital to say that, hey, we want a lot of research in this area, we want a lot of development in this area, and for wise allocation, the allocators get rewarded, right? And it can get taken to an extreme. So speculation actually builds everything in this world, and crypto is no different. Crypto is driven on speculation. Now, so the way Uniswap works is, if you have both Bitcoin and Ethereum, and you want to sort of make markets for other people who want to go from one side or the other, you deposit 50% Bitcoin, 50% Ethereum into this smart contract, and it uses that to make the markets, right? Now the problem with making markets is, if Bitcoin doubled and Ethereum didn't double, then you would, if you made the markets, you would own a lot less Bitcoin. So you would actually sort of lose some money if you made markets, right? So it's not such a good deal to create markets, unless there is a lot of trading volume. In the beginning, when Uniswap is starting, there is not that much trading volume. So how did it convince people that, hey, listen, it's still come in and sort of create markets, even though it's sort of a money losing proposition for you to create markets, right? So the way it worked is, there is something called incentivized LPs. So LP is a limited partner who is sort of depositing the assets, Bitcoin and Ethereum, so that the program can make the markets, right? So if you're the LP, you're the limited partner. So the pitch to you was, hey, listen, if you deposit 50% Bitcoin, 50% Ethereum, I can use that to trade and make the markets. You get, most of the fees from market making, you can keep it. And you know what? On top of that, you will get Uniswap tokens, right? So if you deposit this, I will give you some of my own company shares. You can be a part of my company, right? So most people who came in early to create these markets were not there because the fees were very good. The fees were not very good actually in the beginning, because no one is trading. Why would you get any fees? To attract the market making capital, they gave away Uniswap shares. Even today, if you market make in Uniswap, you get some Uniswap shares. The proportion keeps reducing the more the number of people who are providing liquidity to it. But that's the game theory here. In the beginning, when there isn't a lot of people who are believing, if you sort of go and provide your capital to market make, you will get a lot more Uniswap shares than if you do it today, right? And then it'll keep reducing as more and more people believe in Uniswap. So here the way it works is, you directly give away the company's equity to create these, to create incentives, so that the early speculators who are coming in and market making when Uniswap is worth $0, they're believing that this economic scheme, this almost like a Ponzi scheme, is actually going to work. It's going to play out. The network effects are going to work, right? So, imagine, if the price, so let's say I deposit Ethereum and Bitcoin, and, there is some market making that's happening, and I earn, let's say 3% per year, in fees making the markets. And, I get Uniswap tokens, which is worth, let's say, an additional 2% per year, right? Now I make 5% per year for depositing my assets with this sort of market maker. And if speculators come in and they double the price of Uniswap, then the same 2% per year that I was making from Uniswap is now worth 4% per year for me, right? So now instead of 5% per year, I'm making 7% per year. So the more the speculation, the more the people who want to deposit their assets to market make, and the more the people who want to deposit their assets to market make, the better the liquidity. So the traders can come in and trade. The more the traders that come in, and the more the liquidity that exists, then the token is worth a lot more. So the more the speculators that come in, right? So it's sort of a cycle. It's a capital cycle that plays out and runs really fast. This was always true in the real world. Even startups are built like that. But this is just in this open Ethereum land. It just happens on steroids. Within 12 months, you can bootstrap, a $40 billion company, by this careful economic design. So this is an amazing innovation, and the kind of genius that's happening here. There is a similar thing called Compound, which is the largest internet bank. So you can deposit your crypto and you can borrow US dollars or like other assets in the smart contract on top of Ethereum. And today, for example, you get 8% per year to sort of deposit your assets, or 10% per year to borrow from there. They provide higher interest rates than your bank account. And this also runs on negative unit economics, right? You get 4% per year of Compound tokens for vesting, for sort of depositing or borrowing. So imagine a bank that's losing money. It would go out of business very soon because because it is just running into infinite losses. But in this case, it becomes the largest bank in the world, because the way it's losing money, it's not losing money in US dollars. It's just giving out more of its own company tokens to its users, right? So it can't go bankrupt, because the users are holding these tokens, and because of that, they're incentivized to deposit assets or borrow assets from this bank, and it becomes one of the biggest banks in the world. Again, if speculators come in and double the price of the bank, then instead of 4% per year in bank equity, you sort of end up getting 8% per year, right? In USD denominated terms, if the price of the bank tokens double, then you get more interest rate. So because of higher interest rate, more assets come in and get supplied to the bank, and it becomes a bigger bank, right? So that is how speculators create these economics, and and that is how these things become one of the largest banks in the world, largest market makers in the world, and so on. So this is the idea of network effect, right? So in a network effect business, what actually happens is companies are VC funded. In the beginning, they lose a lot of money. They're almost in negative unit economics. And, till then, they're so very nice to their users. They're always losing their money and so on, losing their own money and being very nice to users. And once they become a monopoly, they can set the terms, they can change the prices, right? And the early investors, the VCs, benefit from that, right? You have the Facebook, you have, whatnot. Like most network effect businesses work that way. Peter Thiel had this interesting sort of question: is innovation constrained by founders or by demand, right? And China took the position that it is actually constrained by demand. So China sort of famously walled off its internet, and it said, I don't need a Zuckerberg. A new Zuckerberg will automatically spring up within China, and they did, right? And India lost out on that. China sort of had created all this wealth internally. The Facebook of China is some Chinese network. The Amazon of China is some Chinese network, and so on. So the network effects, they were able to protect their network, the Chinese network, and and keep much of the wealth that got created within those network effects, right? And crypto is the first effective weapon against this sort of network effect businesses, because it is open, and you can have open speculators who are targeting the global markets, who are sort of funding these network effects from all over the world. And because the equity is so open, because these prices of these tickers change every second, every day, everything plays out way faster, right? To create a Facebook, it took 10 years. To create a Uniswap, it took 10 months, right? These feedback loops run, on steroids on the crypto ecosystem. So you can imagine a Uber for it. You can imagine, why do you need a Uber company, right? Why can't the taxis talk directly with the passengers? Why do you need a company in between? You could have a network where if you added value to the network, you get paid. The taxi sort of drivers get paid. If you took away value from the network, if you took the rights, then you sort of pay those tokens. And there could be token speculators who are subsidizing creating of these network effects in the beginning, and who are benefiting from these network effects in the end. And it could be an open ecosystem where a Uber happens, or an electricity grid does not need to be a company, right? It could be a peer-to-peer accounting ledger. If you contributed electricity into the grid, you get paid. If you took away electricity, you sort of lose some tokens, right? Similarly, Airbnb, similarly Instacart, Amazon, everything is going to get rebuilt. It is a certainty that all of these are going to get rebuilt on crypto. The question is just a matter of when. It is not an if. These companies are not going to exist in 20 years. These companies are going to be crypto native. That is a certainty. And we are talking about $1 trillion companies here. Uber is valued at $100 billion. Facebook is valued at $1 trillion. These companies are not going to exist in 10, 20 years. Crypto is going to take over. Now, there is of course a question of timing. When is this going to happen, right? And again, we can draw lessons from the internet. The internet was founded in 95, 97, but you only have the Airbnb today. Airbnb was founded in 2008 or something, I think. So the chief lesson to be taken, but you had Google much earlier. You had so Google happened in 2004, right? So the important thing to notice is Google is a web native product, which means Google doesn't make sense in the real world at all. There is no equivalent of Google in the real world. It just searches some web pages. What does it even mean, web pages? So Google is a search engine which doesn't make sense in the real world at all. So it's a web native product. So the first set of things that win over are going to be crypto native before there is any physical world impact like Uber or Airbnb or something, right? Things that are native to the web ecosystem, to the crypto ecosystem, those are the ones that are getting disrupted right now, like Uniswap or the future bubbles. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, will come in and disrupt these sort of physical real world stuff like Airbnb and so on. So this is sort of nearing the end of my talk. I can talk a little bit about something that I am working on, something that I am thinking about a lot. Is sort of a decentralized Twitter, right? Of course, it's important because politically incorrect opinions are getting censored everywhere. These monopolies have become too powerful. Using crypto, you can create. This is just a case study, right? Using crypto, you can create these networks of pseudonymity. So, for example, Mark Andreessen has stopped tweeting, right? Because he said something bad about India or something, and then people stopped working with him, and he was forced out of the board of Facebook and whatnot. There is a lot of real world effects for saying something online. And to sort of avoid that, to encourage more free speech, you might have this idea of pseudonymity, right? If you're anonymous, nobody cares who you are. So nobody even listens to you. But what if you can prove that I have 10,000 Twitter followers and I'm being followed by this famous guy called Larry Page, but I won't tell you who I am. Maybe people will care more, right? Now, this is not possible to do today because, if I built a network on a centralized set of servers, then that centralized company will always know who I am. So Mark Andreessen creates an account. Maybe it doesn't tell to the followers, but the government can always ask for that information. The private company needs to tell the government, and the private company will know. The employees of the private company will know. So Mark Andreessen will still not do it, right? With crypto, you can, for the first time, create distributed trust. So I'll describe one such mechanism, the technical mechanism for how this could work. So imagine, you're running a node, you're a miner on this network, you're running a computer, which is sort of a Docker container that you're running, right? And you're staking some coins. You're putting up, let's say, $100,000 in stake, and say that, I want to be a miner in your network. And this network registry, when Mark Andreessen signs up, this network registry chooses, 10 different computers, 10 different validators, randomly weighted by stake, how much money that you've put up, right? You sort of decide and find 10 computers, and these 10 computers alone, Mark Anderson's request is routed, they go and crawl Twitter and verify that, oh yeah, this is actually Mark Anderson, and they sign something and give it to Mark Anderson saying, yes, this guy is followed by Larry Page. Yes, this guy has 10,000 followers, right? Now these 10 computers know who is Mark Anderson, but no one else, no one else in the world knows who Mark Anderson is, and hope that these 10 computers don't log that information, right? Now to get better, now this is already way better than the world, because government cannot go and find out which 10 computers did it, and nobody can go and find out who they are to get that information, right? Now the only problem is these 10 computers know who Mark Anderson is, and they'll be able to figure out. Hope that they don't log, but hope is not a cryptographic strategy. In crypto, you need decentralized trust, right? So to get decentralized trust even further, you do the same thing round 2. Now let's say again you do round 2, you get 10 more validators from the network. It's a random set of sampling again. You get V11 to V20, so you have 10 more machines, and for these 10 more machines, Mark Anderson's computer connects and says, no, it doesn't say I am Mark Anderson. It just shows these signatures and says that, hey, listen, 10 random people chosen by the network signed for me. I won't tell you who I am, but they've signed for the pseudonymous identity, call it Meta Maven, that the Meta Maven is followed by Larry Page, and he has more than 10,000 followers. 10 random people have signed it. So can I get your signature that this Meta Maven guy has this claim? And because, and you get the signature from 11 to 20. Now computers 11 to 20 do not know who Mark Anderson is, does not know that, the information that this guy is Mark Anderson. Computers 1 to 10 know that he's Mark Anderson, but they don't know that he created a new identity called Meta Maven, right? All they know is, they've given some signature to this guy. Now, unless computers 1 to 10 and 11 to 20 talk to each other somehow, and they don't know each other, right? You never know who, unless they collude, you never know that Mark Anderson is Meta Maven. And governments have no way of finding it out. No one on the internet can find it out. So these are sort of some of the crypto native things that become possible for the first time. And, these large companies, Uber, Airbnb, all of these things are going to get rebuilt over the next 20 years. This is the new industrial revolution. And, the best and the brightest minds should participate in this. So wrapping up, this comes to the end of my talk, and, Indians can play a big role. Indians sort of missed out on the internet revolution because, we didn't quite, we were always this open country, right? We speak English, and, the Facebook of India turned out to be Facebook, unlike China, which sort of played a closed network game. We didn't sort of, it was, culturally, it wasn't palatable to us. That's not the way sort of we work. But crypto is one such way where we are sort of more culturally aligned. And, I think Indians are going to play a big role in this ecosystem. They could. It's an opportunity. I'm personally planning to mentor 10, 20 people who are sort of really good engineers who want to get into the blockchain space. And I'm collaborating with InterviewBit to start a blockchain specific program. I'm very excited about India because India has enormous pools of talent who can do heavy infrastructure work, heavy scaling work, the kind of work that blockchain needs, who are making very little money today, right? They don't have the same kind of access to create these billions of dollars, that have traditionally been enjoyed by Silicon Valley. And crypto is going to change that. The only sort of kink in the armor is I wish government was more supportive. The Indian government, it's a huge opportunity for Indians, but the government is sort of trying to ban crypto and stuff. Anyway, my email address is myprasna@gmail.com, and feel free to reach out to me. That comes to the end of my talk. Sorry that it's been a pretty long talk, and I'm open for any more questions. Abhimanyu, you're actually muted. I can't hear you. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's my computer or yours. but I can't hear you. Maybe let me just refresh.
All right, quick voice check. Am I audible now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Give me awesome, amazing. Sorry about that. So thank you so much, Prasanna. Despite it going slightly longer than what we had planned for, I'm sure it was pretty interesting. And of course, blockchain is pretty, of course, complex topic. I'm sure there's a lot more that people can dig into and learn. So thank you so much for hosting this. If you, I will do a quick time check. If you have maybe some 5-10 more minutes, we can take some of the questions.
Yeah, let's keep going. I'm going to be here for 1 more hour or whatever. So let's keep going till people have questions.
Awesome. All right. No, so we do have a lot of questions, guys. If you guys can, upvote the questions that you also like to surface up, we'll take maybe 5-10 questions which have the highest votes. And actually, I do see already, some very, very interesting questions percolating to the top with a lot of upvotes. So on the top, I have from Lokesh. Please share some, interesting ideas for the blockchain, which I think, you did cover, Twitter, etc. I can talk about one which, I don't know whether the feasibility, but one very interesting pattern that many of you might not be aware of is that the interest rates on the loans vary very, very heavily across the countries. So, for example, in India, a typical loan interest rate might be 10%, 12%, or 50%. But on the other hand, the interest rate in Japan would be probably 0.5%. Often, sometimes in developed countries, the interest rates are as low as like sometimes they even go negative. That you give me money and after a year I'll give you less money back with a negative interest rate, right? If someone can create a global CIBIL score backed by blockchain, where my credit worthiness in India, someone in Japan or someone in Germany can also use that to give me loan through crypto, and the kind of economic boost it can provide, the microfinancing, global microfinancing, which potentially can be built on crypto without any of the restriction that government puts on, international money transfer. I think that might be massive as well. That might be a multi-billion-dollar business. I don't know how feasible, what will be the constraints or the restrictions or the legalities around it, but might be something very, very interesting. Another one, like Prasanna, maybe would love to hear your thoughts about this idea. What do you think about building a microfinancing solution, global microfinancing solution back of crypto?
Definitely, that is, crypto's job is to free the capital markets, and that seems like, one way to sort of free it. Like crypto, there is a lot of attraction to decentralization, right? If the key here is to do it in a decentralized way that no one can shut it down. It is sort of even government resistant, right? There are some aspects of this that leak into the real world. If the guy doesn't pay back, do you go to the court? If you go to the court, then you're sort of like leaking back. The code is not law anymore. You're going to the government. So there are some leakages into the real world that are not very attractive. The governments can shut it down by just saying, I'm not going to enforce payments, and then people won't pay back, right? So there are some sort of externalities into this that sort of make it not a very crypto native idea. Yeah, definitely. So on crypto, there are a lot of challenges that are happening today, right? So one thing is like everything is being built on top of Ethereum, and Ethereum is not really scaling, right? How do we scale that is a very important question. There are sort of, right now it's the time of frameworks. People are building frameworks so that like crypto only has 10,000 developers all over the world, right? So you need like millions of developers are going to come. It's going to 100x in the next 10 years. So for people to come in, you need some, like today it's sort of equivalent of people writing C code, right? It's sort of very, very low level. You need to understand the fundamentals to sort of really make a good product here. How do you make the development experience easier for new people who are coming in? So that those are the problem solving is sort of happening at
at all layers of the infrastructure, right? Not just in the app layer. There is a lot more infrastructure problem solving that is happening. Like, hey, listen, Ethereum is not scaling. We need high transactions per second. How do you shard this without compromising, with maximum security? How do you build good development environments? How do you build the Python language of this ecosystem, right? So that new people can come in and build it. And this frameworks today look like you have a database and you can write database code in a low level language today, but that is sort of maturing to sort of slightly higher level languages, where you can sort of create databases with stored procedures. These procedures are running on the data itself, right? So, how do you shard it? How do all these databases talk to each other? Right now, these databases are very inefficient because, any Ethereum transaction that you submit, any code that you run is running on 1 million servers, right? I mean, imagine the same code running again and again on 1 million servers. Do you need to really run it on 1 million servers? That's the scaling bottleneck, right? So maybe you can run it on a smaller number of servers, but you still want to make sure you can trust that the money doesn't get compromised, right? So there are certain levels of trade-offs. Every trade-off today is built for money. Nobody can steal your money, which means you need a lot of security around it. But for something like Twitter or something, if my Twitter is down for like a few seconds, isolated to me, that is probably okay, right? So you don't need like 1 million computers to run the same instruction again and again. So there are different architectures and paradigms that are being developed. So there's a lot of work that is definitely happening at the infrastructure layer. And then there are a lot of ideas that are happening on the economics layer. There is a new stablecoin that launched last week called Fei. Fei is a couple of developers sort of built a smart contract, where they sort of designed some economics around how to create a stable coin token, and $1.3 billion got contributed on the ICO of that smart contract, right? $1.3 billion all over the world last week got contributed into it. So that is the amount of power developers have to creating these smart contracts, and these things are happening all the time. So there is an open economic space where you can create all kinds of incentive schemes for things to work, right? The best some of the very tangible things that one could do is to take on regulatory risk, right? If you're willing to take on regulatory risk, there's a lot you could do. Like, for example, the interest rates in crypto is like 10-20%, right? If you take your money and deposit in US dollars and lend it on any of these crypto native banks, you can make 10-20% per year, maybe more, right? So now the problem is, how do you take your INR, convert it to USD, and sort of put it in these banks? There is the RBI risk, there is sort of all kinds of regulatory risk and all of that things, right? One could create a credit card which gives cash back in crypto, right? So again, you can bootstrap a credit card network like this. In fact, in Korea, that happened in the last 18 months. Actually, there was a crypto company which now has become the top credit card provider for everyone in Korea. All the transactions are happening on the blockchain. It was a crypto native company, right? And you get cash back in this token, which is appreciating in value, right? So you have this speculative effect, which is sort of leaking into the real world. So there are all kinds of innovation that is happening in this space, and it's very, very exciting.
Very interesting. So next up, we have this on the top. We have a question from Hariom, which is: do you have any suggestions for online resources to learn blockchain? I to some extent I know the answer already because it's pretty early, but yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Definitely. I would love to share some materials, maybe by email or something, with readers. There is a really good resource called, How to Build Your Own Blockchain by Haseeb Qureshi. And, there are these amazing materials to learn about Cosmos SDK and Substrate. which is sort of the Django and the Ruby on Rails of this blockchain development land. They have pretty good resources of how you can get started. You can learn about Solidity, which is Ethereum's native programming language. Definitely, there's a lot of interesting things happening.
Awesome. Maybe Prasanna, what would be great is if you can send these resources. And guys, here is I have just posted the link to our Discord server. Join in here, and I'll post all these resources and their links in one of the channels, maybe in the notifications announcements channel, and you can access it from there. All right. So next up, I have the question, which is actually this is a common question. 2-3 different people have asked this. But what do you feel about the future of crypto? Because pretty much all the world governments are against it, right? And it's pretty obvious why they would be against it. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, unlike the internet, there were a lot of governments which were against the internet as well, right? People want to sort of ban, Tiananmen Square, the Iranian movement where people were sort of, congregating against the government. Anytime there is sort of a question on the government's power to do anything, that is going to be sort of governments fighting back. At the same time, some sort of techno-progressive governments will also understand that, you can, this is the future and you can build an economy, a huge economy around this, right? So there is going to be love-hate, and people are going to be trying to control it from various different angles. But these things are fundamentally built to be censorship and government resistant. At the end of the day, no one can block me from writing some code completely anonymously. No one can block me from generating a public-private key pair and holding these assets. No one can trace it back to me. So these things are, the founding fathers of this movement have imagined really bad actors, as people that are sort of going to come to fight against this movement. And these things are built in a censorship-resistant manner that, governments can't really do much. This is going to leak. It can take a while for it to happen. There are certain governments which might embrace and get a lead and all that. But these things are going to exist. Governments can even block it at a TCP IP level, and still, there is going to be leakage. And, so to some extent, it is censorship resistant at its base. But at the same time, innovation, governments do have the ability to drastically limit the amount of innovation that happen within their country, in terms of founders. That's a big problem. If India embraces it, it would be a huge plus for India. But if it won't block it, it's going to be beyond India. Hello. Hey, Abhimanyu, I actually can't hear you. I don't know why. Should I try refreshing again? Okay, let me come back. Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Prasanna, I can hear you.
Now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the next question was, which was the one, that what is the possibility that Satoshi just forgot his password, and that is why there is so much of wealth blocked into his account. But yeah, I think it's impossible for anyone to.
Anything is possible. He could have died. Anything is possible. But definitely, many people speculate it's the CIA who did it. Many people speculate a lot of things. So you just don't know. That's the beauty, is you'll never know.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Next up, I'm trying to find another good question from here.
Most of the questions were around actually, the learning resources, which maybe, I'll take the list from them and I'll post it in the community. Uh, well, I'm just trying to find any repetitive question. Yeah, this one from Belroy is pretty interesting. What are your views about implementing blockchain technology into education system? Like, have you ever gave it a
Into
thought?
what?
Into the education system, Prasanna, that how could it potentially be used into the education system?
Definitely. That's a very broad question. There are
Yeah,
lots of different angles of attack, right? Just like, how did the internet impact the education system? Well, YouTube made it very prevalent. There is courses like Udemy, and, there are all these things that are happening, right? So it won't be like one angle of attack. There'll be like many, many angles of attack. Um, one way of looking at it is like, there are all these platforms today that are extracting rent on top of educators, right? You go to Udemy, you pay them a fee. They have the right to block, any educator from their platform. So that will get decentralized very quickly, for sure. This is not an if, but a when. There will be platforms which are open, which are owned by the token holders, and which will pay educators the tokens. And the top educators will also be top shareholders in these platforms. And
yeah,
it will be censorship resistant. If I don't like what you're teaching, I can't just block you, right? So that's
yeah,
absolutely going to happen, and that's
yeah,
going to happen in every community or union. Is going to create that, right? And then there is also this angle of credentials and pseudonymous identity, where you can prove something about yourself without revealing everything about yourself, right? You could prove that, hey, listen, I know A, B, and C, and I've got these sort of I've completed these tasks, and you can get paid for it, without exactly revealing who you are. um, you know so there's going to be more and more of this pseudonymous identity, especially if countries start blocking founders, right? Countries are coming to war, then what do? You become pseudonymous. um, and that is why my friend Metacoin was pseudonymous, right? India didn't like crypto. He didn't want to be held at the airport when he flies into India, right? Um, so, there is definitely going to be this angle about credentialing that is going to go on the blockchain. Again, crypto does not like centralized credentialing. If there are some institutions like Stanford that are giving you a seal, that are by definition censorship, institutions. We sort of care a lot more about the decentralization of it, where you get credentials based on what you've learned, the work you've done, and not based on where you've learned or any particular party giving you some credentials, right? Um,
yeah,
so there is some interesting new startup that Balaji Srinivasan has started. You should check it out. Where he was one of the top course creators um, in all these sort of uh, online education space, right? He was a top teacher. He had like millions and millions of followers. He's very rich from starting his companies and otherwise in crypto. He's a top crypto name, and he started a company recently where you get paid for completing small tasks, right? And as you complete these tasks,
yeah,
you get more and more credentials, and you get more and more complicated tasks. So he's sort of
yeah,
taking trying a different blockchain take on
yeah,
education.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Maybe I will take this one last question, which is, which is from Muhammad, which is, which all coins are you holding? Prasanna, personally, which are the coins that you have highest, in crypto, that you are betting on?
Yeah, so I am very long. I think the one that I am sort of most bullish on right now is a coin called Atom. It's Cosmos. Cosmos is sort of like the Python Django, the Django framework of crypto. It lets you build your own blockchain. Um, it's not cheap. It's worth like $5 billion. But there are some of the major biggest crypto projects are built on top of that. The ticker name is Atom. um, so I'm very bullish on Atom related to other coins. I'm also, I hold a lot of Ethereum. I think it's the Wall Street of crypto of the world. That has already been proven out. Ethereum is already worth $300 billion. So that's not, that's not going to give the next 10x or 100x.
Yeah.
I'm also bullish on Polkadot and this coin called Near. Near is sort of sharded Ethereum. I know the founders personally, and they're ACMI CBC World finalists, so they're building a really good blockchain. So these are some of my holdings. These are most of my holdings, pretty much. A lot of Cosmos, a lot of Ethereum, Polkadot, and Near. A little bit.
Interesting. What's the name of the last one, Prasanna?
Near, NEAR.
Yeah, got it. Amazing, awesome. So, Prasanna, I think that's all. Thank you so much, for this very insightful session. To be very candid, for the first time, I kind of, got a grasp onto what this blockchain is about. So I was intently just listening in throughout the session. Thank you so much, all of you, for staying back. And I'm launching a quick poll, which is just, the feedback poll that we do. If you all can mark this one. Do you all see a poll on your screen? All right. So just, I would request you all to quickly read this so we know, how useful this was for you all. Helps us improve better. And there is one more poll that I am launching. Let me see. Actually, this poll is still active. I'll give it a couple of more seconds. Oh yes, Discord channel link, guys. Let me put the Discord channel link here as well. Prasanna, by any chance, are you active on Discord as well?
Yes, I'm going to join that.
So here is the link to Discord. So Prasanna, would be great if you can also join in, and maybe we can create another channel for blockchain there, where community folks can keep posting their questions, and we can also answer.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Awesome. One more poll that I'm launching is, which is, we launch this after each masterclass. You all should be seeing. So just this one as well. Cool. Awesome. So thank you so much, everyone. Loved this session. Looking forward to see you all at and at either one of next masterclass, or maybe on our Discord channel. Thank you so much, Prasanna, for running us through this very fascinating tech. All right.
Thank you guys.
Everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.